Okay, this is part 2 of walking through the spatial data lab. When you add the data, I hope you noticed that your Bailey ecoregions came in with a red exclamation point. This is a layer file, and I talked about this in part 1 a little bit. The way to fix this, it just means that the path to this is broken. And so again, if we look in the properties, and we'll see that this is where it's looking. It's looking on the C drive, and it's moved. This isn't the location of the geometry for this data anymore. So all we have to do is go to the data folder that we pulled in the ecoregions from, and go to data, repair that data source. So we want to fix the path. So the Bailey ecoregions, here's the shapefile that generates the geometry that allows this to draw. And then this is the same data set but without the fancy symbology saved. If I turn that off, then we have the ability to see the unique symbology that was saved for this data set. So this is a copy and we don't need this anymore. So this is going to have all the same stuff. We're going to be able to see the attribute table because it's drawing from the original shapefile. This is just symbology saved in the layer file, but it draws from the original data set. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so the first question in the instructions is whether or not the Diem is raster or vector data, and hopefully from part 1 you know how to check that out now. Question 2 is what's the resolution of the Diem? And this is something I want you to get in the habit of. Whenever you add spatial data to your map, you should, especially with rasters, right away ask yourself, what are these values? What do these mean? The second thing you should find out is, what resolution is this? Because your rasters, if you're going to do any kind of calculation, need to have similar cell sizes. And so you need to get in and dig into these properties. So this is an elevation model, so the range of values here represents the elevation, in this case in meters, and we don't know that, but typically spatial data is always stored elevation in meters, but you could always look at the continental US and just Google what's the highest point, and then if it doesn't match this number, do some classic conversions from feet to meters, and you would be able to intuit that this is in meters. So when we look at the raster properties, we have a certain number of columns and rows. This is how many cells there are across and down. Number of bands means this is a black and white image. If it had 3 bands, it would be a color like that, like this guy from New York. I can't look at it because this is open. And then right here, the cell size tells us how big each cell measures on the ground. So the right answer for question number 2, what is the resolution, would be this number, and then what are the units for that? We get it from the coordinate system. The spatial reference for this data set is this thing. This is the coordinate system, and the linear unit is meters. So these are in meters. And I said right in the question that resolution is traditionally or conventionally reported in 1 dimension. Why is that? Well, let's say for a very easy example, if you have a 100 meter resolution, so your cell size on the ground is 100 meters, and you report that as 100 meters squared, most people that do GIS would think that that's a 10 meter resolution. So just for clarity and consistency, it's an industry standard to report resolution as just 1 dimension. So you'd say that this is a 1129.676313 meter DEM. You can also just narratively or conversationally call this a 1 kilometer DEM or a 1,000 meter DEM rounding. But if you're going to ever calculate area or do anything, you'd of course want to use the actual cell value to maintain the precision of your calculations. Okay, so that's question 2. Question 3, what's the coordinate system of the USA DEM? And there was a student that pointed out that the answers weren't worded very well, and they were absolutely right. So for those of you who answered this, US contiguous Lambert conformal conic, or just Lambert conformal conic, I gave you a point for that. So this is the coordinate system for rasters. It's always under the spatial reference, XY coordinate system. So it's this entire thing. This is the datum. This is the 3-dimensional model that it's built on, and this is the projection, and the entire thing together is the coordinate system. For vector data, it's not called a spatial reference. They actually refer to it as the coordinate system. So this data set doesn't have a projection. It's in a geographic coordinate system, and the geographic coordinate system is WGS84. You can say GCS WGS84 if you want, but this stands for geographic coordinate system. So either way is just fine. All right, that's question 3. Question 4 is, what do you think the values in the DEM represents? So that's what we just talked about. This is a range of values from 1 to 4,328. This is an elevation model. And so you need to make sure these are intuitive and that they make sense. Going down to the hillshade, what do these guys represent? What these represent is just the color between white and black. ARC typically divides a color ramp up into 254 different bins, and then the bins are divided up along this color ramp into 254 colors. Each one has a number. And so these are just the number that equals what color gray it is. It has nothing to do with hillshade. I mean, it has nothing to do with slope. It has nothing to do with aspect. It's just how bright it would be with an arbitrary light source at a certain altitude and angle in the sky. So these things don't belong in a legend ever, but you definitely should use elevation or hillshades in your maps as a display tool because they are so awesome. Look at the basin and range. It's so great. Okay, so elevation in meters. And then the next question is about this guy. Is this little image raster or vector data? It's a TIFF. That's your first hint. TIFFs are rasters. Think of photographs. They're pixels, continuous matrix of pixels. We can also go into the properties and check it out here. It's a raster. This is also an image. I'm going to drag it up here. Remember that if you ever can't rearrange your files, it's because you're listing by source instead of listing by drawing order. This usually happens when you bring in a table. It'll flip you over to listing by source, and that just means it's showing you the folder that each thing is in. And folders or data that are in similar folders are grouped together, and that's why you can't rearrange them. Okay, so I'm going to zoom to this guy. It's going to be a little out of whack because we need to be in a different coordinate system for New York. Hang on, I'll get that switched over. All right, it's UTM zone 18. So I'm going to go to the data frame properties, coordinate system tab, projected, go down to UTM, go down to NAT 83, and then choose 18. And that should get us oriented north up. And we can turn other stuff off because we don't care about anything else right now. Okay, so the question here is whether this is a raster or vector. We looked it up in the properties. You can also zoom in on it to realize that it's a matrix of pixels. If it has resolution, what is the resolution of this data set? Right click, go into the properties, and we're looking for the cell size. So 0.3 by 0.3 x and y. Units again come from the coordinate system. So 0.3 meter resolution. And the coordinate system for this data set is the spatial reference. So this would be the coordinate system for this data set. And then on the image, zoom into the most northerly of the two green rectangular fields. Zoom to layer. So the more northerly, if we're north up, zoom into the most northerly of the two green rectangular fields east of the river. Use the identify tool to find the zone 18 coordinates of the center circle. So here's the center circle, and we're basically talking about right here. So I'm going to grab the identify tool. This is a great tool for just kind of getting to know your data and figuring out things like, where is this? What might the elevation of this location be, etc. So if I click here, it opens the identify window, and then I generally will click again because you usually need to reset once you get this open. But what we're looking for are the coordinates of the center of the circle. So here's the location right here. We can choose different units for it, but this is correct for what we want to do. And because we have the coordinate system set correctly for the data frame, we can just extract the coordinates here. And so this is the easting value because it's relevant to the, relative to the 500 meter central meridian for a UTM zone. And then this guy is the northing because it's describing how far north we are of the equator. So the bigger number, the one that's in the millions in North America, is the northing, and then the smaller one this 6-digit number for UTM is going to describe the easting because we have that false meridian, the central meridian of 500,000 meters. And so this means we're just east of the central meridian. Okay, I'll stop there and then we'll pick up with question 9 in the third part.